Hey, it's Antonio. Welcome back to my channel. Who's ready for some fighting words? In this video, I want to talk about Joe Smith. I want to do a fight breakdown for Joe Smith versus Beterbiev. So here we go. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. Listen, the first thing we know about Joe Smith is the dude's got power. And he's not shy about it. It's very vocal about it. And he puts all his eggs in that basket. I don't necessarily think putting all your eggs in the basket of power is a bad thing. But I think when power becomes your bread and butter, I think you put yourself at risk to a lot of things. Because you have to factor in, what if a guy can take a punch? You have to factor in, what if the guy has a great engine? You have to factor in, what if a guy can box? You have to factor in, what if, listen, strategy can beat power. And not only can strategy beat power, but a great jab can control power. So although he does possess a lot of power, I mean, he's got the knockouts, he possesses a lot of power. But one thing that I've always felt is that Joe Smith does put a lot of, emphasis on the power and the knockouts. At heart, Joe Smith Jr. really is a brawler. I mean, that's what he is. When he turns on the heat, he just turns into a brawler. He can box. I'm not saying that he cannot box, but at his core, what type of fighter he is, he's a brawler. At his core, that's just what he is. You look at somebody like Evander Holyfield. The dude could box his butt off, especially at cruiserweight. But when he went heavyweight, primarily, he just turned into a brawler. Now, granted, maybe he felt he had to do that because of the weight difference. But technically, boxing would have served him better at heavyweight. But that's just what he was at his core. It's just that when he was at cruiserweight, nobody really brought him to that place where he had to let that out of him because he was such a great boxer. He was light on his feet, combinations. He could punch on the outside, could punch on the inside. And, I'm not saying Joe Smith Jr. is Evander Holyfield, but he does possess boxing ability when he's controlled. But once the fight gets going, he just morphs into something else. He's a brawler at heart. And listen, I'm not saying that's a bad thing because, it definitely can serve you in a fight where you have another dimension to your fight game, but also to your personality. You have another dimension to your personality where you let that beast out. So I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but I feel personally that he lets that brawler out more so than he may need. And I feel like sometimes he relies on that brawler. So it may not always be the best thing for him. Really quick, if you like what you're hearing, please support the channel. How do you support the channel? You like the videos, you subscribe to the channel, you tell a friend, and you drop some comments down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Let's get back to this video. One thing that he does really well, there's two things that I really like about Joe Smith, but one thing in particular, he has a great jab. Joe Smith has extremely long arms, and he has a great jab. He just knows how to pop it out there. So a lot of American fighters, like myself, we fight from here, but a lot of European fighters fight from here. And Joe Smith fights from here, although he's American, he fights from here. And it serves him so well because he has those long arms. It really does serve him well. And Joe Smith is one of the few boxers who will throw triple jabs. He'll just pump it. He'll just throw that jab out there. And he'll be fully, and another thing I like is that he's fully committed to those jabs. A lot of guys will throw they'll double it up. But very seldom do you see a guy throw a triple jab and he's committed to all three of them. A quadruple jab, and he's committed to all four of them. Joe Smith Jr. will actually be committed to all four of them. Why? Because he knows he has that punching power. I think he also is great at body work. My only critique when it comes to Joe Smith in his punching arsenal in all is that he's either going to attack the head or he's going to attack the body. He doesn't mix up. If he's fighting you, he's going to say, I'm going to headhunt, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to focus on the midsection. I'm not going to focus on downstairs. I'm just going to headhunt. Or he'll say, I'm going straight to the basement. I'm not worried about the attic. I'm going straight to the basement. He doesn't mix up very well. That's my only critique. Is he a great body puncher? He's a pretty solid body puncher. But he doesn't mix up well. And, you're fighting Beterbiev, like you need to be able to mix up because that dude's going to mix up. He's got a gumbo pot of punches, okay? And you can't just come with, one little serving of fish and think that's going to cut it. You have to keep a guy like that guessing. You can't just be a one-trick pony in the ring with Beterbiev. And, in all transparency, I see Joe Smith Jr. being a bit of a one-trick pony facing Beterbiev. Not saying that he does not have a chance. Obviously, he has a chance. He hits extremely hard. Obviously, he has a chance. He's a champion. That means he has a championship spirit and heart. Obviously, he has a chance. I mean, he beat Bernard Hopkins. Now, I know your argument toward that is going to be Bernard Hopkins was 70 years old when he beat him. It doesn't. Listen, that second stretch of B-Hop was actually better than the first run. So you can say whatever you want, but when he was claiming to be an alien, he was looking pretty good. Making short work of people and looking good while doing it. So there you have it. Now, I broke this down to this section down, and it's basically called "Don't Do Joe." Okay, do not do these things. Leaning forward. So Joe Smith likes to do this thing where again he has those long arms, and his arms are looping down. So when Joe Smith throws a punch outside of a jab, it kind of looks like a ball and chain. Now, granted, he has those long arms and he hits hard. So kind of like Deontay Wilder, to be honest with you. When he does that, he leans forward. Now, by leaning forward, again, with a guy like Beterbiev, you cannot do that. That leaning forward is not going to serve you. If just go and look at his fights, look at his highlights, he leans forward a lot with his head. He leans forward with his head because he overcommits to his punches because, again, the punching power. So he leans forward with his head. Now, I did do a fight breakdown for Beterbiev. If you have not seen it, please watch it. There should be a link in the corner over here. But it's important because I mentioned that Beterbiev throws really short punches. Hardly ever is he fully extended. Everything is like just kind of just a snap. Now, with Joe Smith leaning forward when he throws his punch, he's in a range of danger. A range of danger if he does that. Now, at this stage in his career, I believe old habits are going to die hard. You've been doing it all your career. I don't foresee you, like in this particular training camp for Beterbiev, you actually stopping that. That's just the way you fight at this point. I don't know if that can be rectified. You can teach somebody something. You can teach someone something new. But to critique and fix something at this stage, especially what he does a lot, I don't know if that can be fixed at this stage. I think if they were to start it now, maybe they can correct that in I don't know, 2 years or something like that. That's just a character flaw that he does when he throws his punches. So another thing that he does is when Joe Smith Jr. throws combinations, he has a tendency to get sloppy. He has a tendency. So if he were to throw, for example, if he throws like a 4 or 5 punch combination, especially if he's going to the body and their hooks or their hooks, I guarantee you the last two are going to be extremely sloppy. All right, they're going to be extremely sloppy and they're going to be wide. Now, again, you cannot do that with Beterbiev. Again, he has a greater arsenal of punches. And again, he has a better way of getting those punches off. And he fights extremely well in close quarters. If you throw these looping, wide hooks, and he does this underhook motion, if you do that, dude, you got so much open real estate. And I do believe Beterbiev is faster than him. So he can't afford to do that. He has to keep his punches tight. If you cannot do that, because I don't suppose, again, you could train something new in one training camp, that's fine. Then do it from a high guard. That's fine. Just do it from a high guard. But those looping hooks, it's not going to serve you well. It could very well leave you comatose. So that needs to be fixed before you get in the ring with Beterbiev. Now, I already spoke about it, but the wide hooks, that's just something, he kind of gets in this windmill motion where he's just in a frenzy. And I'm like, dude, you're talking about, a fighter from Eastern Europe. Like, realistically, those guys are so seasoned. Those guys are so just fundamentally sound. Doing something like that, number one, you're not going to get away with it. Number two, you're going to pay for it. And number three, you're going to put yourself in a very bad position. So you can't afford to do that. Simple attacks. That will actually lead me to my next section, which is do this, Joe. Okay, do this. So we're going to start with keep your distance. You got those long arms. You got those long arms for a reason. You have an amazing jab. And you're one of the very few people who can fully commit and land 3 triple jabs and quadruple jabs. Pick him off from the outside. In this fight, I believe Joe Smith Jr. is going to have his greatest success being a sniper from the outside. I don't feel like he's going to have much success, close quarters. But if he's on the outside and he's picking his shots, and maybe you just might have to pot shot for maybe the first 5 rounds, whatever. Like, you look at Floyd Mayweather, he would just pot shot for a while. He would just to gain the points, but also to soften the guy up. And he would mix it up. So he might, throw something to the head, and then he might go to the body. He might he might step off of the hook, something. But he never followed it up with anything. He would throw that one shot and move away. I think that's a great strategy for Joe Smith Jr. in this fight against Beterbiev. I feel like, I'm not saying the entire fight, but I am saying the opening rounds, you cannot let this guy get hot. You cannot let this guy get comfortable. You cannot let this man get in his groove. So you have to do something like pot shots. That way, Beterbiev doesn't know what you're throwing. And also, it doesn't really matter if he knows what you're throwing because you're not going to be there. You're only throwing one at a time. Now, just keep it to simple attacks. That's it. Simple attacks. Maybe in the second half of the fight, you can lay it on a little thicker. Maybe you can start doubling it up more. Maybe you can figure out where he's softer in the body. Now, whether that's the attic or that's the basement, you're gonna have to figure that out in a fight. But once you figure that out, then you could do a committed, sustained attack toward that area. Unless Beterbiev stops that and you have to do otherwise. A perfect example of a fight that I would want to see for Joe Smith Jr. would be Devin Haney versus George Kambosos. Was it the most entertaining fight in the world? No. Was it the safest fight in the world? Yes. And can Joe Smith Jr. win fighting this type of fight? Fighting strictly off the basis of a jab? Absolutely, he can win. He's got those extremely long arms. He hits hard. I don't believe Beterbiev's just going to walk into that. I'm sorry. He's a tough dude, but I don't think he's just going to voluntarily walk into that. So I do see Joe Smith Jr. keeping him on the outside, or potentially just keeping him on the outside. Maybe even if it's just for the beginning rounds, points are points. So, and not only that, you always run the risk that you could clip him. If he can't hit you because he's too far away and you can hit him, you always run the risk, not the risk, but the opportunity that you could clip him, which is more than possible. Joe Smith hits that hard. Let's see. Again, keep the high guard. Keep the high guard. If you want to pull it in. Let your elbows rest on your ribs, even so, and bring it in, bring it down. But a lot of times, Joe Smith is so open. He's so open, and again, that goes back to those power shots. Why? Because he has the mentality of a power puncher. The mentality of a power puncher is seek and destroy. Mentality of a power puncher is very predator-like. So he is open because he would also entice his chin in hopes that he can hit your chin. But with Beterbiev, let's not take that chance. And finally, I would just say, listen, don't fight in close quarters. It's not going to serve you. I know you're a brawler at heart, which is what I mentioned in the beginning. I know you're a brawler at heart, but that will not save you. That will not benefit you any in this fight. It will totally work against you in this fight. It's best to stay on the outside. It's best to pick your shots. It's best to use that jab. Doubles and triples and quadruples. It's better to do these things. You pop and you move. You're out. Pop and you're out. Keep that man guessing. You can do that easily for like 6-7 rounds if it's done correctly. And I believe Joe Smith Jr. has the potential physically and athletically to get that done. And last but not least, please, 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 do not, I'm saying this again, do not start a brawl. It's not going to work in your favor. Stay composed, stay poised, and stay controlled. But do not start a brawl. Do not get emotional in there, because you're in there with a guy who is a Terminator. There is no emotion in this guy, okay? So don't give him anything to work with, period. And with that being said, that's pretty much my fight breakdown for Joe Smith Jr. Drop your comments down below. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you agree with the fight breakdown. Tell me if you think I missed something or I left something out. Drop your comments down below. I would love to hear what you have to say.